Welcome. Today we're diving into a story that defies expectations and reshapes our understanding of wartime innovation. It's the tale of a remote Pacific island where, in just 20 days, a lush, untouched jungle was transformed into a massive, strategic airfield by a team of just 387 men using only 6 bulldozers and a handful of other equipment. How could such an impossible feat be achieved so quickly? And what does it reveal about American engineering during World War II? But it doesn't stop there. Think about this. Japanese military strategists believed it would take at least a year to build similar infrastructure, yet the Americans completed it in weeks. The Japanese thought they had the upper hand, only to realize their assumptions about U.S. industrial capacity were catastrophically wrong. How did they discover this gap? Was it through intercepted signals or the destruction of their own records? And what happened when the Japanese first encountered this unstoppable construction force during the Guadalcanal campaign? When they watched in shock as the Americans turned a captured airfield into a fully operational base in just days. Imagine battles fought not only with guns and bombs, but with the brutal realization that the United States could rapidly erect, repair, and expand vital military infrastructure under enemy fire, shattering Japanese expectations and rewriting the rules of warfare. How did this newfound industrial might influence Japanese strategy? Could Admiral Yamamoto's decision to focus on destroying Henderson Field be seen as a direct response to this unstoppable American capability? This is a story of underestimated strength, strategic surprises, and the raw power of industrial engineering that changed the course of the Pacific War. And in this video, we'll uncover the truth behind these rapid constructions, analyze the strategic consequences, and piece together how this relentless American resilience ultimately altered the fate of the Pacific Theater. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about wartime innovation and the true scale of American industrial power. The most astonishing reveals start right now. Early morning of July 20th, 1942, brought with it a thick, muggy humidity that hung heavily over the South Pacific region. On the small, remote island of Espiritu Santo, an extraordinary and seemingly impossible transformation was underway. In a span of merely 20 days, what had once been pristine virgin jungle, lush and untouched, was rapidly giving way to a bustling construction site. Where dense foliage and natural wilderness had prevailed, American engineering crews were now diligently working to complete a formidable 6,000-foot-long airstrip, an airfield designed to serve as a strategic hub for military operations in the Pacific Theater. The remarkable feat was accomplished by a dedicated detachment from the United States Navy's Construction Battalion, better known as the Seabees, specifically from the 3rd Construction Battalion Group. Using only 6 bulldozers, 2 scrapers, and a total of 387 men, this team achieved in just a few weeks what Japanese military doctrine had assumed would require many months and the labor of thousands of workers. This rapid construction was nothing short of astounding, especially considering the common expectations of military planners at the time. Unfortunately, no Japanese diary or personal account from an observer survives to document this particular accomplishment firsthand. However, intelligence gathered from captured documents and interrogations conducted after the war reveals a stark truth. Japanese military strategists had fundamentally and catastrophically misjudged American engineering and construction capabilities. What they believed would take the United States at least a year to achieve, enough time to build infrastructure, prepare for offensive operations, and establish a foothold, was completed in mere weeks. This revelation profoundly contrasted with their pre-war assessments, which through translated signals intelligence reports known as ATIS, Automatic Terminals Information Service, had indicated that American forces would require 12 months or more to be fully prepared for offensive action after securing any new territory. The reality, however, shattered these expectations entirely, exposing a gap between Japanese assumptions and the formidable, often underestimated, industrial and engineering prowess of their adversaries. The story of how Japanese military leaders came to understand and grapple with the true extent of American construction capability is not chronicled through detailed personal memoirs or diary entries, most of which were destroyed during the war. Instead, this story emerges through the analysis of American construction records, strategic reports, and the limited Japanese sources that survived the chaos of war's end. These fragments tell a narrative rooted deeply in facts, statistics, and undeniable strategic consequences. They reveal a sobering truth. Japanese commanders, once confident in the predictability of their adversaries' capabilities, were forced to confront a brutal reality, namely that the Americans possessed an industrial and engineering capacity that far exceeded what Japanese military doctrine had anticipated. This capacity, an ability to rapidly erect, repair, and improve vital military infrastructure, created a new, more unpredictable battlefield dynamic. The first significant encounter between Japanese forces and this formidable American construction capability occurred during the Guadalcanal campaign, though the full implications of this ability would not be immediately understood. When American Marines launched their assault on August the 7th, 1942, they seized an almost fully operational Japanese airfield at Lunga Point. The Japanese had employed a workforce of nearly 2,800 workers, comprising Japanese nationals, Koreans, and local civilians, over the course of more than a month to construct what would eventually be known as Henderson Field. Within just 6 days of the landing, the Americans had succeeded in making the airfield fully operational and ready for combat. The initial American arrival was marked by the deployment of the 6th Naval Construction Battalion, the first CB unit to see combat, which arrived on September the 1st of that same year. This unit consisted of 387 men and 5 officers. The pattern of rapid construction, relentless improvement, and resilience in the face of enemy attack was established immediately. As documented meticulously in official records maintained by the Naval Construction Battalions, these CBs set about expanding and enhancing Henderson Field while under constant threat from Japanese forces. The Japanese, based at Rabaul, launched daily noon raids with Mitsubishi G4 Betty bombers, raids that inflicted damage but never succeeded in halting American progress. For example, on the night of October the 13th and the morning of October the 14th, 1942, the Japanese battleships Kongo and Haruna unleashed a heavy barrage of shells, over 900 shells in total, aimed directly at the airfield. This bombardment created 53 craters in the runway. Yet by dawn on the following day, the airfield was again operational and ready to support American military efforts. This sequence of events would repeat across the Pacific, illustrating a pattern of American rapid construction, repair, and adaptation under enemy fire, an aspect of warfare that was changing the strategic landscape in ways that Japanese planners had not foreseen. The ability to swiftly build and restore critical infrastructure became a decisive factor in the Allies' ability to sustain prolonged campaigns in hostile territory. The strategic implications of this capability were profound, forcing Japanese commanders to confront anew the swift and effective response of the Japanese military to the evolving strategic landscape during the early years of the Pacific War vividly illustrates their increasing awareness of the importance of rapid construction and logistical adaptability. This shift in their military approach was driven by the realization that control over key airfields could significantly influence the outcome of naval and ground campaigns alike. For instance, Admiral Yamamoto, recognizing the threat posed by a well-constructed and maintained airfield, made a decisive move to reorient the focus of the combined fleet's primary mission. Instead of concentrating solely on supporting ground operations, he ordered the fleet to prioritize the destruction of Henderson Field. This strategic pivot underscored the importance of denying the Allies the use of Henderson, which had become a critical asset in the Guadalcanal campaign. The Japanese response to Henderson's emergence as a vital military asset was swift and targeted. The infamous Tokyo Express runs, high-speed destroyer missions designed to resupply and reinforce Japanese ground forces, were a direct countermeasure to Henderson's threat. These fast destroyer operations could carry only limited amounts of supplies and were incapable of transporting heavy equipment or large numbers of troops. Nonetheless, they represented an urgent effort to maintain Japanese positions by attempting to undermine the Allied control of the airfield. The very existence of such rapid resupply missions reflected a recognition that the construction and operational capability of Henderson Field had fundamentally altered the logistical equation, forcing the Japanese to adapt quickly. This strategic shift towards rapid construction and maintenance of airfields had profound implications for the Japanese military's logistical planning and operational effectiveness. By establishing a single airfield capable of supporting sustained air operations, the Americans inadvertently created a logistical choke point that contributed directly to the eventual starvation and defeat of Japanese forces on Guadalcanal. The ability to quickly repair, reinforce, and operate Henderson Field meant that Japanese attempts to isolate or neutralize it were often thwarted in hours rather than days. An early example of Japanese misjudgment and underestimation of American construction capabilities was seen during the assault led by Colonel Konao Ichiki. Confident that his 917-man unit could recapture Henderson Field, Ichiki believed the airfield was only lightly defended and still under partial construction. His forces launched a major counterattack, which culminated in the Battle of the Tinnaru on August 21, 1942. Tragically for the Japanese, Ichiki's force was completely annihilated during this engagement, a devastating blow that underscored their miscalculation. While Ichiki's personal papers and operational orders were destroyed in the aftermath, intercepted Japanese documents revealed a fundamental lack of appreciation for the speed and sophistication of American construction efforts. Japanese intelligence had expected to find a semi-finished, lightly defended airfield, something easily manageable with a relatively small force. Instead, they encountered a fully operational military installation, already hosting a squadron of 31 Marine aircraft. The reality was starkly different from their assumptions, highlighting a critical intelligence failure on their part. The Japanese High Command, under Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake, made 3 separate attempts to retake Henderson Field between August and November of 1942. Each of these assaults was based on the assumption that, once damaged, the airfield would require weeks to repair. For example, after the intense naval bombardment in October, considered the most severe of the campaign, Hyakutake's staff estimated that Henderson would be out of commission for no less than a week. However, the actual timeline for its restoration proved far more rapid, with American engineers and troops restoring operations within a matter of hours. This unexpected resilience of Henderson Field forced a fundamental reassessment of American logistical and engineering capabilities among Japanese strategists. The realization that Allied forces could repair and bring back operational airfields in hours, rather than days or weeks, significantly altered Japanese planning and expectations. As the Allies advanced into the Central Pacific in 1943, the disparity in construction, speed, and logistical support between the two sides became increasingly evident. Perhaps the most striking demonstration of American logistical prowess occurred during the Gilbert Islands campaign, particularly the battle for Badio Island on Tarawa Atoll. The Japanese defenders, numbering approximately 5,000 troops from the 3rd Special Naval Landing Force and the 7th Sasebo Special Naval Landing Force, had spent months fortifying the island's defenses. Their efforts culminated in the construction of a nearly 4,500-foot airstrip, a feat achieved through relentless manual labor over several months. This formidable preparation was intended to serve as a strategic bastion in the Pacific, designed to support Japanese operations further into the region. However, the American response was swift and decisive. During the assault that took place from November 20th to the 23rd, 1943, the United States Marine Corps, supported by a naval construction battalion, rapidly transformed the devastated airstrip into a functioning airfield in just 15 hours. This remarkable feat was not an estimate or a propagandist's claim, but was thoroughly documented in the official action reports of the Naval Construction Battalion involved. It demonstrated the incredible speed. In the years leading up to the Pacific Campaign, the speed with which American forces could establish air superiority over newly captured territories had grown dramatically. What once might have taken weeks or even months to build an effective airfield and make it operational now could be achieved within mere days, marking a profound shift in strategic military capabilities. This rapid construction and deployment of air power played a pivotal role in turning the tide of the war across the Pacific theater. The operations conducted by the United States in the Marshall Islands during the early months of 1944 serve as a powerful testament to this emerging reality. At a place known as Quadraline, The 121st Construction Battalion undertook a remarkable transformation of the captured Japanese facilities, converting them into a major aviation hub capable of supporting significant air operations. While combat activities were still ongoing in the region, the true importance of this effort lay not in the ongoing battles, but in the swift and efficient development of infrastructure. Simultaneously, the 110th Naval Construction Battalion embarked on a vital project. They reconstructed the heavily damaged Japanese runway into a sprawling strip measuring 6,800 feet in length, purpose-built to support B-24 bombers. This runway would soon become a critical launch point for bombing missions targeting the Japanese stronghold at Truk. The extraordinary pace at which these developments occurred starkly contrasted with Japanese intelligence assessments, which grossly underestimated American construction capabilities. This discrepancy is well documented in translated documents sourced from archives maintained by the National Institute for Defense Studies. Prior to the outbreak of hostilities, Japanese estimates projected that American merchant shipping construction would reach around 5 million tons in the year 1943. However, the actual figure dramatically exceeded these predictions, coming in at nearly 19.2 million tons, an underestimate of approximately 400%. Likewise, Japanese intelligence believed that by December of 1943, the United States Navy would have accumulated roughly 1,070 officers and nearly 300,000 enlisted personnel. In reality, the Navy's strength far surpassed these figures, with over 219,000 officers, more than 120,000 officer candidates, and approximately 234,000 enlisted men. These numbers were more than 7 times higher than initial estimates. Yet nowhere was the failure of Japanese intelligence more evident and consequential than in their underestimation of American construction prowess. Japanese military doctrine, preserved in captured manuals and training documents, allocated months for the completion of major airfield construction projects. Their planning was rooted in a fundamentally flawed understanding of mechanized rapid construction, a process they simply could not comprehend. Japanese construction units, such as the 17th Setsu, operating in the Solomon Islands, relied on rudimentary hand tools with inventories comprising 900 shovels, 90 hoses, and limited rollers. They lacked any conceptual framework for understanding that American aviation engineer battalions would deploy with fleets of over 140 vehicles and more than 200 pieces of specialized construction equipment each. The campaign across the Mariana Islands during the summer of 1944 brought this disparity into sharp strategic focus. These islands were destined to serve as crucial bases for the new American B-29 Superfortress bombers, which aimed to strike deep into the Japanese homeland. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saitito, commanding the Japanese 43rd Division on Saipan, would bear witness to the staggering capabilities of American construction forces, capabilities that defied everything in Japanese military experience. The fall of Saipan's Asto airfield to American forces occurred on June 18, 1944, just 3 days after the invasion had begun. Remarkably, within only 4 days, units including the 3rd Battalion of the 20th Marines alongside the 121st and 18th Construction Battalions had restored the airfield to operational status, capable of supporting P-47 fighters. By July, despite ongoing fierce fighting in Saipan's northern mountains, the airfield was being expanded to accommodate the enormous B-29 Superfortress bombers. The first of these massive aircraft arrived on October 12, 1944, flown by Jolton Josie of the 73rd Bombardment Wing. The loss of General Saitito was tragic. He did not live to document his experiences or to reflect upon the implications of these developments in memoirs. His life ended in suicide on July 7, 1944, as American forces tightened their grip on the island. However, his final orders, preserved in translated form, reveal a stark awareness of what the rapid construction of airfields signified for the Japanese military. His observations underscore the shock and concern that must have accompanied their realization that the United States had developed an entirely new level of logistical and engineering capability, one that rendered traditional Japanese planning for rapid airfield construction obsolete. This technological and strategic leap fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Pacific, underscoring a new era where speed, mechanization, and innovation became decisive factors in warfare. Continued. It was anticipated that the enemy would soon escalate their efforts, launching a comprehensive and all-encompassing assault aimed at overwhelming defenses and seizing control of critical positions. In the face of this looming threat, I resolved to stand my ground, defending the sovereign's territory with unwavering resolve, prepared to fight to the very last breath. I was committed to resisting at all costs, refusing to accept the humiliating fate of being taken prisoner alive, which I considered a disgrace that I would rather die than endure. Saipan's strategic importance became increasingly clear to Saito, as he understood that its airfields would enable enemy bombers to reach Tokyo, placing the Japanese capital within devastating range. However, what he could not have fully comprehended at that time was the extraordinary scale of the construction effort that would soon unfold. The transformation of Saipan into a formidable base for B-29 bombers required moving millions of tons of coral and earth, a monumental task that demanded unprecedented engineering and logistical coordination. The Allied forces, particularly the Corps of Battlefield Service, CBS, deployed their advanced Caterpillar D7 and D8 bulldozers to accelerate this process. They operated tirelessly, 20 hours each day, with only 4 hours allocated for maintenance and refueling. The D8 bulldozer, boasting a horsepower of 148 and hydraulic controls, could complete the work that would have taken hundreds of manual laborers countless days. In stark contrast, the Japanese forces lacked any machinery comparable in power or efficiency. When the 17th Set Tai construction unit was captured in the Solomon Islands, interrogations revealed their inventory: 5 trucks, a single steamroller, and a collection of basic hand tools. The Japanese military commanders on Saipan initially believed that fortifying their positions would take months, even years, given their traditional reliance on manpower and manual labor. Yet the American construction teams defied those expectations, building multiple operational airfields within a matter of weeks. What was even more shocking to Japanese sensibilities was the ability of American engineers to construct these critical facilities while under enemy fire. Japanese military doctrine emphasized the warrior spirit, Yamato Damashi, over material capabilities or engineering prowess. Their focus was on honor, bravery, and fighting spirit, not on rapid construction or technological innovation. But on Saipan, they bore witness to combat engineers who embodied both roles simultaneously: warriors and builders. The 121st Construction Battalion, originally assigned to the Marine Corps, fought as infantry while operating construction equipment, blending combat effectiveness with technical skill. This dual capability, combining battlefield combat effectiveness with engineering expertise, represented a concept entirely outside Japanese military experience and tradition. If Saipan's rapid fortifications shocked Japanese commanders, the scale of what transpired on the neighboring island of Tinian left them utterly stunned. The construction project there remains one of the most extraordinary feats of military engineering in human history, completed in an astonishingly short period. Between July of 1944 and May of 1945, the 6th Naval Construction Brigade, composed of 15,000 CBS personnel, transformed Tinian into what became the largest bomber base complex in the world. The records kept by the Naval Construction Battalions still attest to the staggering magnitude of this undertaking, even many decades later. They carved out 6,850-foot runways from dense jungle and coral, creating a sprawling airfield network that could accommodate the enormous B-29 bombers. Northfield, one of the main airfields, contained 4 parallel runways, each capable of launching aircraft on 3,000-mile round-trip missions to Japan. Westfield was expanded to include 2 additional runways, further increasing the base's capacity. The amount of coral moved, blasted, and compacted during this operation was equivalent to filling the Hoover Dam 3 times over. The Japanese forces on Tinian, commanded by Colonel Kiyoshi Ogata, numbered around 9,000 troops, a sizable garrison tasked with defending the island at all costs. Although most of these forces died during the island's fierce defense, the rapidity and scale of American construction efforts were apparent even during the ongoing battle. On July 24, 1944, CBS units landed alongside the initial assault waves, marking the beginning of their critical engineering work. By August 1st, even as the Japanese forces still held the southern part of Tinian, American engineers had already begun repairing and extending the former Japanese fighter strip at Northfield, transforming it into a fully operational airfield. The Japanese had initially built their airfields over many months, relying heavily on forced labor from prisoners brought from Chamorros and Koreans. A captured Japanese document further illustrated the disparity in construction capabilities, exposing the stark difference in approach, one rooted in forced labor and manual effort, and the other in engineering efficiency and rapid deployment. The scale of American achievement on Tinian exemplifies the profound shift in military engineering and logistical strategy during the war, fundamentally altering how such massive projects could be completed in record time, even under the most perilous conditions. The detailed account from Tinian, translated by ATIS, sheds light on the Japanese understanding of American construction methods during the Second World War. According to this report, the Americans relied heavily on straightforward, labor-intensive techniques for their engineering projects. The primary tools used by U.S. forces included manual crushing of coral, hand mixing of concrete, and simple implements such as picks and shovels, methods that required significant human effort and time. For instance, the report estimated that extending a single runway by 1,000 feet would necessitate approximately 1,000 laborers working tirelessly for a span of 2 months. However, in stark contrast, American engineers and construction units managed to expand Tinian's runways by 4,000 feet in less than 30 days, showcasing a remarkable level of efficiency and logistical coordination. This rapid development had profound psychological implications for the Japanese defenders, particularly those who remained on the island and faced the relentless advance of American forces. While interrogations conducted by the Office of Naval Intelligence primarily aimed at extracting military intelligence, rather than specific construction details, several prisoners expressed their astonishment at the American engineering capabilities. Many of them, independently of each other, remarked on the stark difference in construction technology. One captured member of a naval construction unit simply stated, "We could not compete with the U.S. Navy's method that used bulldozers and power shovels versus our method that relied solely on shovels and manual scoops." Such statements reveal a sense of awe and perhaps frustration at the technological gap that separated Japanese manual labor from American mechanized machinery. Among the Japanese military leaders, Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kurabayashi, who commanded the garrison on Eniwetok, was arguably the individual best positioned to grasp the full scope of American industrial and engineering capabilities. His extensive experience included serving as a military attaché in Washington, D.C. from 1928 to 1930, during which time he traveled extensively throughout the United States. His personal correspondence, later published as Picture Letters from the Commander-in-Chief, offers some of the rare surviving Japanese insights into American technological prowess. On February 19, 1945, when American Marines launched their assault on Eniwetok, Kurabayashi commanded approximately 21,000 defenders. Over the preceding months, he had dedicated considerable effort to fortifying the island's defenses, transforming it into a formidable underground fortress. Japanese construction troops had built an intricate network of 11 miles of tunnels, underground command posts, and concealed artillery positions, an extensive engineering feat that took many months of painstaking labor to complete. The American approach to such construction starkly contrasted with the Japanese philosophy. Rather than emphasizing concealment and static defenses, the Americans prioritized rapid construction and mobility, deploying heavy machinery to expedite their projects. The landing forces included the 31st and 133rd Naval Construction Battalions, NCBs, which arrived with the assault waves. The 133rd NCB, attached to the 4th Marine Division, suffered the highest casualties of any CB unit in history: 40 killed, 156 wounded, and 48 evacuated due to sickness out of roughly 1,100 men. Despite these losses in the ongoing combat, the construction pace was extraordinary, surpassing what Japanese engineers believed possible. Within mere days of the initial landings, damaged Japanese airfields were being repaired and brought back into operational status. By February 26th, just 1 week after the initial landings, the first American aircraft, an OY-1 artillery spotter, successfully landed on the reconstructed airfield. As the battle persisted into March, the rapid repair efforts continued. Notably, on that exact day, the first B-29 Superfortress made an emergency landing on the island's airfield. This aircraft from the 9th Bombardment Group had been damaged during an attack over Tokyo and was unable to return to its base in the Marianas. The swift repairs to the Eniwetok airfield not only saved the aircraft, but also the crew aboard. Unfortunately, Lieutenant General Kuribayashi did not live to see the full outcome of these engineering feats or the eventual American victory. He died during the final Japanese assault on Ma. The narrative cuts off here, marking the end of his leadership and the Japanese resistance on the island. On April 1, 1945, swiftly seized control of the Kadena and Yontan airfields, two strategic targets that the Japanese forces had surprisingly left largely undefended, an oversight that would prove costly. In just a matter of days, by April 3rd, units such as the 38th Battalion of the Construction Battalion Service, CBS, and the 19th 101st Aviation Engineer Battalion had moved swiftly onto these captured airstrips, beginning the critical work of repairing and expanding them for operational use. Their efforts were nothing short of extraordinary. In a span of merely a few days, these engineering units transformed the battered airfields into operational bases, capable of supporting American fighter aircraft engaged in close air support missions for ground troops. The scale of this rapid construction was unparalleled, marking a new chapter in battlefield engineering. The magnitude of the project only grew in the days that followed. Eventually, a total of 95,000 personnel from both the Army and Navy dedicated themselves full-time to building and extending infrastructure across the island. Their collective efforts aimed at creating facilities capable of supporting a staggering 4,000 aircraft, an enormous logistical feat. To achieve this, various specialized units, including the 8th, 10th, 70th, and 11th Naval Construction Brigades, were tasked with more than just establishing airfields. They were responsible for constructing comprehensive port facilities to ensure effective supply and reinforcement lines, ammunition dumps to stockpile munitions, hospitals to treat the wounded, and extensive supply depots to sustain ongoing operations. In essence, these engineers were building a fully functional, self-sufficient military city amid the chaos of battle, an unprecedented feat of wartime construction. Throughout the ongoing conflict, Yahara's memoirs vividly detail his growing realization of the extraordinary capabilities of American engineering and logistical support, capabilities that, even in his seasoned military perspective, seemed to surpass expectations. While his focus often remained on the tactical and strategic implications of the battle, he couldn't help but observe the impressive engineering feats unfolding around him. The rapid, large-scale construction efforts demonstrated a level of organizational discipline, technical skill, and adaptability that Japanese military doctrine had not anticipated. For example, the construction of airfields capable of supporting hundreds of aircraft within days of landing reflected a logistical agility that was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. Yahara's account offers a unique perspective, given his background and experience. He had served as an exchange officer in the United States from the years of 1933 through 1935, during which he studied at Fort Moultrie and traveled extensively across various American military installations. This background gave him a more nuanced understanding of American military capabilities than most of his Japanese counterparts. Yet even with this knowledge, he was profoundly struck by the scale and speed of American construction efforts on Okinawa. The statistics alone are staggering. Within hours of the initial landings, the Americans had already secured and begun revitalizing the airfields, transforming them from exposed, battered strips into bustling hubs capable of supporting a heavy and continuous air campaign. Yahara's writings reflect an appreciation of the meticulous planning and overwhelming logistical support that underpinned the American war effort on Okinawa. The engineers and construction units, operating under constant threat of enemy fire, demonstrated an unprecedented ability to adapt and execute complex tasks swiftly. This relentless pace of construction not only supported immediate tactical needs, but also laid the groundwork for sustained operations, ultimately enabling the Allied forces to maintain air superiority and logistical stability throughout the campaign. In conclusion, the American ability to rapidly construct, repair, and expand vital military infrastructure during the Battle of Okinawa underscored a vital strategic advantage that Japanese military leaders had not fully anticipated. Yahara's detailed observations provide a rare and insightful glimpse into this critical aspect of the campaign, emphasizing that the true strength of American military power extended far beyond individual weaponry and soldiers. It was rooted in their extraordinary capacity for engineering, logistical support, and rapid construction, which proved decisive in establishing and maintaining control over the battlefield. The American forces proved remarkably efficient in establishing operational bases at a pace that far outstripped the Japanese military's ability to launch counterattacks. A vivid account of the Japanese counteroffensive on April 19th vividly illustrates the futility of such efforts, especially considering the fact that American positions were continuously being reinforced and supplied through the rapid construction of new facilities. These facilities were built swiftly enough to render Japanese attacks almost pointless, as the Americans could strengthen their defenses and maintain a persistent advantage. Yahara, who observed this process firsthand, perhaps sensed, but could not fully articulate, a fundamental divergence in military philosophy that underpinned the contrasting approaches of the two sides. The Japanese military doctrine placed a significant emphasis on the spiritual and moral elements of warfare, the warrior's spirit, believing that a determined and disciplined fighter could overcome material shortcomings, such as lack of equipment or numerical inferiority. In stark contrast, American military practice prioritized a pragmatic combination of combat power and industrial capability, viewing technological superiority and logistical efficiency as essential components of victory. Within this context, the role of combat engineers, such as the construction battalions, became critically important. The American engineers, often referred to as CBS and combat battalion servicemen, possessed a unique versatility that allowed them to perform dual roles with remarkable proficiency. These units were composed of personnel who could operate rifles with the same skill as they handled bulldozers, embodying a seamless blend of combat readiness and construction expertise. Their organization brought civilian construction skills directly into military operations, enabling rapid, large-scale infrastructure development on contested islands. In stark contrast, the Japanese had no equivalent force capable of such efficiency. Japanese construction units, when they existed, were either made up of military engineers with limited equipment or civilian laborers who were conscripted for the purpose of manual labor, but lacked combat capability and technical expertise. For example, when the 17th Setai was captured in the Solomon Islands, interrogations revealed that its members had no specialized training for combat or construction. They were essentially unarmed laborers with minimal equipment, embodying a stark difference from the highly trained and versatile American CBS units that could build and fight simultaneously. The full scope of the Japanese intelligence failure regarding American construction capabilities was only fully understood after the war, through meticulous post-war analyses. Between 1945 and 1946, the Strategic Bombing Survey conducted by Allied forces included comprehensive interrogations of Japanese military and civilian officials captured during hostilities. These interrogations, together with documents translated by the Allied Technical Intelligence Service, ATIS, unveiled the depth of Japanese misunderstanding about American industrial and logistical strength. One prominent figure, Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukuome, who served as the Chief of Staff of the Japanese Imperial Navy's Combined Fleet and later commanded the Second Air Fleet, admitted in post-war interrogations that Japanese naval planning had never anticipated the rapidity with which Americans could construct and deploy military bases on captured islands. This was a sobering realization, given that pre-war Japanese doctrine held that once an island was seized, it could serve as a defensible position for months, allowing reinforcements to arrive and consolidating control. The Americans, however, demonstrated the ability to turn captured islands into offensive strongholds within mere days or weeks, effectively invalidating these long-held strategic assumptions. The numbers involved underscore the scale of this intelligence failure. Japanese planners had estimated that building a 6,000-foot runway capable of accommodating heavy bombers would require the efforts of roughly 3,000 to 5,000 laborers working diligently over a period of 3 to 6 months. In stark contrast, American CBS units accomplished exactly that, constructing such a runway in just 20 days, with only approximately 1,100 men. This 5 to 6-fold efficiency advantage, combined with the American military's capacity to deploy multiple construction battalions simultaneously, meant that American infrastructure development proceeded at a pace that Japanese strategists had never envisioned possible. The disparity extended beyond manpower and planning into technological and equipment advantages. The equipment gap was equally striking. For example, a single D8 bulldozer, an advanced earth-moving machine, had the capacity to move more earth in 1 hour than 300 manual laborers could shift in an entire day. By 1944, American forces in the Pacific Theater operated hundreds of such bulldozers, which greatly accelerated construction efforts and contributed significantly to the rapid expansion of their operational bases. Meanwhile, the Japanese faced a severe shortage of heavy construction equipment. They had so few bulldozers and other mechanized tools that captured American machinery became highly prized assets, often considered more valuable than almost any other form of wartime equipment. This scarcity hampered their construction efforts and underscored the technological and logistical gaps that existed between the two forces. In sum, the American ability to build bases quickly and efficiently, driven by highly trained combat engineers equipped with modern machinery, starkly contrasted with the Japanese reliance on less capable units and manual labor. The strategic implications of these differences were profound, highlighting how technological superiority and logistical sophistication can decisively shape the outcome of modern warfare. The disparity in construction capabilities between the opposing forces reflected deeper differences rooted in their respective industrial and organizational frameworks. While the Japanese military's approach to construction was firmly anchored in traditional methods, these practices were essentially adapted from civilian building techniques, maintaining a conservative stance that emphasized continuity with the past. The Japanese relied heavily on manual labor, employing picks, shovels, and human-powered transport to carry out their projects. This reliance was not solely due to shortages of specialized equipment, but was also intertwined with their military culture, which prioritized values such as endurance, discipline, and spiritual resilience. In contrast, American military engineering demonstrated a complete embrace of industrialization, transforming construction into a highly efficient and mechanized process. The construction battalions recruited from civilian industries brought with them extensive experience and knowledge of modern industrial techniques. They applied principles such as time and motion studies, regimented maintenance schedules, and standardized procedures, practices commonplace in American civilian construction, directly to their military projects. Unlike the Japanese, who often built with locally sourced materials and customized each project to its specific context, Americans focused on prefabrication and mass production. Prefabricated components like modular mats, standardized huts made from Quonset designs, and uniform fuel tanks could be manufactured en masse in factories, then shipped as complete, ready-to-install systems, significantly accelerating construction timelines. This fundamental difference meant that American forces could deploy their engineering capabilities swiftly and maintain consistent quality across various locations. The impact of American construction expertise on Japanese forces was profound, though much of this influence is pieced together from limited sources such as prisoner interrogations, captured correspondence, often censored, and post-war testimonies. While detailed personal narratives remain scarce, the general pattern of Japanese perception is evident, a trajectory from initial confidence through growing confusion and ultimately to a sense of despair. At the outset, Japanese military doctrine, deeply rooted in the concept of Yamato Damashi, the Japanese spirit, asserted that spiritual strength and unwavering resolve could compensate for material shortages and technological inferiority. Their remarkable early successes, such as the attack on Pearl Harbor and swift victories across vast stretches of the Pacific, appeared to validate this belief. Japanese forces had been able to defeat numerically superior Western powers, relying on their indomitable fighting spirit and tactical ingenuity, despite possessing inferior equipment and resources. However, the first encounters with American construction capacity, most notably on Guadalcanal, began to undermine this confidence. The rapid and resilient completion of Henderson Field, even under relentless bombardment, demonstrated that organizational efficiency and industrial strength played a crucial role in military success. This was a revelation that went beyond mere material superiority. It highlighted the importance of logistics, engineering, and industrial capacity, areas where Japanese forces lagged behind. By 1943, insights from prisoner interrogations reveal that Japanese soldiers and officers increasingly recognized the technological and organizational superiority of the Americans. Members of Japanese construction units, when captured, expressed a mixture of awe and frustration at the advanced American equipment and methods. They observed how American engineers could bring entire airfields online within days of starting construction, a feat that was virtually impossible with Japanese manual methods. The strategic implications of this disparity became clearer, as every newly captured airfield underscored the speed and efficiency of American engineering efforts, forcing Japanese commanders to confront the reality that their traditional approach was no longer sufficient in the face of American industrial might. The strategic significance of this transformed military landscape cannot be overstated, as each new island became a crucial stepping stone in the United States' relentless push toward Japan's home islands. Instead of engaging in prolonged, costly battles on every island, American forces adopted a highly efficient approach centered on rapid, targeted construction of forward bases. These bases served as launch points for subsequent operations, allowing for swift progression across vast stretches of the Pacific. The rapidity of this process was so remarkable that by the year 1944, even the highest levels of Japanese command were deeply affected, experiencing a profound shift in morale and strategic outlook due to the ongoing losses in the seemingly unstoppable American advance. The fall of Saipan marked a pivotal moment in this campaign, as it brought the strategic reach of the American Air Force within striking distance of Japan itself, thanks to the new long-range B-29 superfortresses. This loss, coupled with the looming threat of direct attacks on the Japanese mainland, precipitated the collapse of Prime Minister Tojo's government. Japanese military leaders, recognizing the implications of American logistical and construction prowess, understood that every island lost in the subsequent campaigns would serve as a crucial foothold, transforming into a platform from which to launch direct assaults on Japanese territory. The Japanese responded by accelerating their own efforts to develop countermeasures, but these efforts were outpaced by the Americans' ability to establish large, fully operational bases on Tinian and Saipan at a pace faster than Japan's capacity to mount effective defenses or innovations. As the war entered its final, most desperate phase, Japanese defensive strategies revealed a clear shift in mentality. Rather than defending beaches at places like Iwo Jima and Okinawa with a hope of repelling the landings, Japanese commanders opted to fight from prepared, fortified positions inland, fully aware that American forces would land regardless. This tactical decision reflected an understanding that the United States possessed overwhelming logistical advantages, particularly in construction capabilities, which made it impossible to prevent landings outright. Instead, Japanese defenses aimed to inflict maximum casualties, betting that such a strategy would drain American resources, increase costs, and perhaps make the Americans reconsider their relentless advance through negotiations or stalemates. This strategic evolution was fundamentally driven by the American ability to rapidly construct new bases, a capability that fundamentally reshaped the course of the Pacific War. It was not simply a matter of faster construction or more efficient logistics. It represented a revolutionary change in military strategy, enabled by advances in construction technology, organization, and planning. The island hopping campaign, which involved bypassing heavily fortified Japanese strongholds and instead capturing less defended islands for the purpose of building airfields and support facilities, became possible only because the United States could build bases at an unprecedented pace. Admiral Chester Nimitz's decision to bypass the heavily fortified Rabaul, the major Japanese base in the Southwest Pacific, exemplified this new approach. Instead of risking costly assaults on Rabaul itself, the Americans focused on quickly constructing airfields on neighboring islands, thus neutralizing Rabaul through superior air power and logistical efficiency. The timeline of these campaigns was compressed in a way previously deemed impossible. Pre-war Japanese military planning had anticipated that any American offensive across the Pacific would require years of deliberate, step-by-step advance, with long pauses to allow for the construction of essential bases and supporting infrastructure. In stark contrast, American forces from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, more than 3,000 miles apart, advanced with astonishing speed, achieving this in less than 3 years. Each newly captured island served as a vital base for the next phase of the campaign, enabling the rapid leapfrogging of Japanese defenses and facilitating a continuous, sweeping offensive across the Pacific theater. Meanwhile, there was a significant disconnect between what Japanese military personnel experienced firsthand and what the Japanese civilian population was led to believe about the war effort. This gap was largely the result of strict wartime censorship, which systematically suppressed information regarding the true state of American industrial and construction capabilities. Letters sent by soldiers from the front lines were heavily censored, with references to American equipment, the speed of construction, or material superiority routinely deleted. Only a few uncensored letters, most of which never reached Japan, provide glimpses of the soldiers' genuine astonishment at the Americans' rapid buildup and technological prowess. These glimpses reveal that the frontline Japanese troops and Marines recognized the overwhelming logistical advantage that American forces held, but this understanding was kept hidden from the Japanese home front. Japanese propaganda, meanwhile, portrayed the Americans in a vastly different light, depicting them as morally weak, spiritually deficient, and overly reliant on material wealth and technological superiority. This narrative was designed to bolster morale among civilians and military personnel alike, emphasizing resilience and spiritual strength as the core virtues of the Japanese war effort. However, the stark contrast between the actual capabilities observed by soldiers and the carefully curated information disseminated to the Japanese populace underscored the profound disconnect at the heart of Japan's wartime information strategy. It was an attempt to sustain morale in the face of mounting defeats, even as the reality, the American military's technological and logistical accomplishments during World War II were nothing short of extraordinary. Yet these achievements often remain hidden from the Japanese civilian population, who were led to believe that their forces enjoyed a significant spiritual and moral superiority over the materialistic and industrial nature of the Americans. Propaganda broadcasts from Radio Tokyo, carefully monitored and translated by American intelligence agencies, consistently emphasized a narrative that celebrated the Japanese warrior spirit, portraying it as invincible and inherently superior to the physical and technological advantages held by the United States. This messaging aimed to bolster the morale of the Japanese people by fostering a sense of national pride rooted in cultural and spiritual strength, rather than acknowledging the material disparities between the two sides. In reality, however, the American forces possessed not only a commanding material superiority, but also a remarkable capacity for endurance under the most grueling combat conditions. This crucial fact was deliberately obscured from the Japanese civilian population through distorted and selective reporting. Even factual military updates, which could have provided a clearer picture of the situation, were carefully manipulated. For instance, the fall of Saipan was depicted as a heroic defensive effort against overwhelming enemy numbers, with no mention of the strategic advantage gained by the Americans through the establishment of operational bases for their B-29 bombers during the ongoing fighting. The true scope of American military logistics and strategic planning remained concealed, creating a skewed perception among the Japanese that their defenses still held the line. The swift American advances through the Philippines further exemplified the disparity between Japanese perceptions and reality. Official reports attributed these rapid advances primarily to American numerical superiority, neglecting the critical role played by the rapid construction of supporting bases on newly captured islands, accomplished in a fraction of the time believed possible. This information gap had profound strategic implications, as it kept Japanese civilians and military leaders unaware of the true extent of American logistical efforts. It was not until late 1944, when the devastating B-29 raids intensified, that the Japanese began to comprehend how suddenly and effectively the American air campaign was reaching their homeland. Prior to these revelations, the Japanese populace couldn't grasp how American bombers could suddenly arrive over Japan when the defensive perimeter was still assumed to be intact. What they did not know was that American construction battalions, these formidable units known as the Army Corps of Engineers, had been quickly and efficiently building large-scale airbase complexes on captured islands within mere months. The full scope of this massive construction effort, once understood, provided critical context for Japan's impending defeat, illustrating the sheer scale and speed of American logistical mastery. By the conclusion of the war, the United States had transformed the vast Pacific theater into a sprawling network of strategically positioned bases, effectively choking off Japan's options and rendering its strategic situation hopeless. The combined effort of the United States Army Corps of Engineers and Coast Guard Seabees had produced an astonishing number of military facilities, with the total engineer strength reaching 325,000 men, of whom approximately 80% served directly in the Pacific Theater. These dedicated personnel constructed over 111 major airstrips and 441 piers, creating a formidable infrastructure. In addition, they built extensive ammunition magazines and warehouses, 2,558 facilities covering an area equivalent to 700 city blocks, and housing for around 1.5 million personnel. Fuel storage capacity alone reached an impressive 100 million gallons, enough to sustain sustained operations across multiple fronts. Over 300 bases were established on as many islands scattered across the Pacific, transforming the region into an interconnected military hub. The scale of equipment utilized was equally staggering. During the course of the war, more than 50,000 bulldozers, massive, powerful machines, were produced, with thousands of these deployed specifically to support operations in the Pacific. Among these, the Caterpillar D-17 bulldozer, weighing around 15,000 pounds, was the workhorse of Pacific construction efforts, capable of generating 25,000 pounds of drawbar pull, making it an essential tool for rapid airfield and infrastructure development. Compared to the American industrial might, Japanese forces had no comparable machinery or innovation on this scale. A notable breakthrough was the development of men matting, also known as pierced steel planking, an innovation that revolutionized the construction of airfields. Each section of this steel plank was 10 feet long, 15 inches wide, and weighed 66 pounds, featuring 87 drainage holes that facilitated rapid drainage and durability. By 1943, American factories had produced enough master mats to cover the construction of 2,400 runways, each measuring 5,000 feet long and 150 feet wide. The total output of this prefabricated runway material reached an astonishing 2 million tons, an amount comparable to the steel required for creating 600 Liberty ships. This prefabricated runway material could be quickly laid down on cleared areas, transforming them into fully operational airfields within hours rather than days or weeks. The human effort behind these feats was equally impressive. For example, at Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, the Construction Battalion Maintenance Unit, CBMU personnel, maintained and repaired the runway even beyond the boundaries of Japanese military experience. The rapid pace and remarkable efficiency of American construction efforts during World War II stood as a testament to an industrial and logistical revolution. Time and again, the United States shattered previous records for construction speed, setting new benchmarks that often seemed almost impossible to achieve under wartime conditions. One of the earliest and most striking examples of this was the construction of the airstrip on Espiritu Santo in July of the year 1942, which was completed in just 20 days. This feat not only demonstrated the incredible organizational capabilities of the Allied forces, but also established a new standard for rapid military engineering, turning what once might have taken months into a matter of days. As the war progressed, these achievements became more ambitious and more widespread. By 1943, the U.S. Navy's 47th Naval Construction Battalion, commonly known as the Seabees, accomplished an extraordinary feat on Vangunu Island. In only 9 days, they constructed a runway stretching 3,300 feet, a length sufficient to support significant air operations in the Pacific Theater. This was a clear indication that even in remote island environments where logistical challenges seemed insurmountable, American engineering units could deliver infrastructure with astonishing speed and precision. The pace of construction on Pacific Islands continued to accelerate. In November of 1943, the rehabilitation of the airfield on Tarawa was completed in a mere 15 hours, transforming a Japanese-held facility into a functional base almost immediately after capture. Such rapid turnaround times underscored the strategic importance of seizing and quickly restoring key airfields, allowing Allied forces to project power further into enemy territory without delay. These examples collectively illustrated that captured Japanese military facilities could be rendered operational within hours or days, significantly shortening the time between conquest and deployment. Among these impressive feats, Tinian Island stood out as a singular symbol of American construction and logistical capability. In less than a year, a force of 15,000 construction battalion CBs had transformed Tinian into the largest airbase complex in the world. The scale of this effort was staggering. 4 parallel runways, each measuring 8,500 feet in length, could support the launch of 100 B-29 Superfortress bombers daily. The sheer size and capacity of this base underscored a strategic reality. This single complex could deliver an overwhelming amount of explosive power to Japan, surpassing what the Japanese military could mobilize in their own defense. The transformation of Okinawa was perhaps even more dramatic and symbolized the culmination of months of relentless construction efforts. The plans for Okinawa's infrastructure were vast, aiming to support an air fleet of 4,000 aircraft, more than the entire remaining Japanese Air Force. Port facilities capable of handling the invasion fleet were rapidly developed, alongside ammunition depots intended for the anticipated invasion of Japan, hospitals prepared for the inevitable casualties, and supply depots designed to sustain millions of troops engaged in the final stages of the Pacific Campaign. When Japan finally surrendered, these extensive preparations were in place, with 95,000 American construction troops actively building the infrastructure necessary for the ultimate assault on the Japanese homeland. While most senior Japanese officers who observed and understood the remarkable American construction capabilities did not survive the war, the convergence of various types of evidence, official records, personal testimonies, and strategic analyses, paints a compelling picture of how Japanese forces experienced and perceived these developments. American construction records provide detailed timelines, precise statistics, and comprehensive accounts of the scale and speed of the operations, allowing a clear understanding of what was achieved and how quickly. Meanwhile, Japanese strategic decision-making increasingly revealed an awareness of the importance of engineering and infrastructure development. As the war progressed, Japanese leaders recognized that American construction efforts were fundamentally shifting the battlefield dynamic. Limited testimonies from Japanese witnesses, though sparse, offer valuable insights into their professional amazement and strategic despair. One of the most significant accounts comes from Colonel Hirami Yahara, who survived the battles on Okinawa and later penned a memoir that provides an important first-hand perspective. Yahara described American construction activities with a tone of awe, noting their mechanical precision and relentless pace. He observed that American engineers often worked more than half a mile ahead of the front lines, operating in no man's land, surveying, marking sites, and preparing for future military operations, all under the threat of enemy fire. His account highlights how American engineers, often working in frontline conditions, continued their tasks with unwavering focus and efficiency. Yahara's post-war analysis further underscored these observations. He acknowledged that American construction capabilities had rendered Japanese defensive positions increasingly untenable. The growing material superiority of the Allies, especially in engineering and logistics, meant that any position the Japanese evacuated would quickly become a new base for advancing enemy forces. This understanding, however, came too late to influence Japanese military strategy significantly. Nonetheless, it demonstrated that at least some Japanese officers grasped the terrifying implications of American engineering prowess. Among those Japanese officers who understood the strategic significance of American construction was Captain Riki Inaguchi, a senior staff officer serving under Admiral Onishi, the architect of in the evolving landscape of warfare during that era. The United States demonstrated a remarkable and almost unsettling ability to rapidly establish military air bases across vast stretches of ocean and island territories. This capability was so advanced that it rendered many aspects of traditional naval strategies and the defensive plans that relied heavily on controlling specific maritime routes or territories completely obsolete. As American forces captured key islands, they didn't merely hold ground. They immediately began transforming these locations into formidable air power hubs. Each newly seized island served as a springboard, projecting American air strength further westward into the Pacific theater with remarkable speed and efficiency. This rapid expansion effectively compressed the enemy's defensive perimeter, forcing Japanese forces to react and adapt at a pace that often left them in a state of constant strategic catch-up. The Japanese found themselves unable to match the swift and flexible American approach, which negated many of their previous defensive advantages and placed them on the back foot. To gain deeper insight into the technological and logistical capabilities that underpin this American advantage, one must turn to the primary sources from the Japanese side, specifically the testimonies of Japanese engineers responsible for constructing fortifications and defensive installations during the war. Unlike military officers, who tended to focus on strategic or tactical narratives, these engineers provided detailed accounts of the technical marvels they observed in American construction efforts. Post-war interrogations of surviving members of Japanese construction units revealed a sense of professional astonishment and even admiration for American methods. An engineer from the 17th set of Tai, whose name unfortunately is not recorded in available historical documents, reportedly remarked that observing American construction techniques was akin to witnessing a glimpse into the future of engineering and military logistics. He observed that American engineers deployed machines capable of completing in mere hours tasks that his own unit would have required weeks of manual labor to accomplish. Such efficiency marked a profound leap forward in military engineering capabilities, fundamentally altering the logistical landscape of war. Beyond individual accounts, the broader strategic decisions made by the Japanese military reflect a clear understanding of the formidable American construction capabilities. For example, the decision not to defend the beaches at Iwima and Okinawa in the traditional sense, by trying to hold the shoreline, was rooted in the expectation that American forces would establish beachheads and promptly support them with constructed facilities, regardless of initial resistance. Instead of attempting to defend every inch of territory, the Japanese shifted their focus toward fighting from prepared positions further inland, aiming to inflict casualties and slow the American advance, rather than halt it outright. This strategic pivot was driven by the recognition that the American ability to rapidly build and support bases rendered traditional territorial defense strategies ineffective. The Japanese leadership understood that, as the Americans established infrastructure, the terrain itself would be transformed into a network of operational support, making it impossible to prevent the eventual American dominance of key areas. This strategic mindset extended into the Japanese military's desperate measures to counteract American construction efforts. The kamikaze program, perhaps the most iconic example of Japan's last-ditch tactics, can partially be seen as a response to the American capability to build forward bases swiftly. Conventional naval aviation in the Pacific relied heavily on elaborate, well-maintained bases, along with extensive ground support, maintenance facilities, and trained personnel. As American construction battalions systematically advanced closer to Japan, establishing new bases and support hubs, the Japanese facilities and infrastructure, both on land and at sea, were increasingly destroyed or rendered obsolete. In this context, kamikaze attacks, which required only one-way fuel supplies and minimal ongoing maintenance, emerged as an innovative, albeit desperate method to sustain air operation despite the systematic erosion of their traditional support infrastructure. These attacks sought to bypass the need for heavily defended bases, aiming instead to inflict maximum damage directly on American ships and aircraft, attempting to compensate for the dwindling Japanese ability to project air power through conventional means. Post-war intelligence documents shed light on the Japanese efforts to develop countermeasures against the American construction juggernaut. These plans, although largely unimplemented, revealed a strategic awareness of the importance of sabotaging American logistics and engineering efforts. Among the proposals were special infiltration units tasked with infiltrating American construction sites to sabotage equipment and kill operators, thereby slowing or disrupting the rapid buildup of American bases. Additionally, there were considerations of deploying chemical weapons to contaminate or destroy construction materials and sites, further hindering American logistical capabilities. However, these plans faced significant practical and security challenges. None were effectively executed, underscoring both the limitations of Japanese clandestine operations and the high level of American security measures designed to prevent such a sabotage. By the year of 1945, the Japanese homeland defense strategies reflected a full awareness of the formidable American construction capabilities. Military planners understood that any American landing would be accompanied by the swift establishment of extensive, well-supported base complexes, regardless of the resistance faced. Consequently, the Japanese shifted their strategic focus from outright prevention of base construction to a more defensive posture that aimed to make the Americans build those bases over a landscape littered with Japanese casualties. The hope was that the resulting high toll of casualties would force the Americans into negotiations. The trajectory of the war in the Pacific ultimately reveals a story of rapid technological and logistical evolution, marked by a series of pivotal moments that significantly influenced the course of hostilities. The fall of the Tojo government, following Japan's catastrophic defeat at Saipan, served as a stark political acknowledgement that the strategic landscape had shifted dramatically. The loss underscored the realization that American B-29 superfortresses could soon establish bases on Japanese soil, making the homeland vulnerable to relentless, high-altitude bombardments. This understanding prompted a profound reevaluation within Japan's military hierarchy regarding their defensive strategies and construction capabilities. In response to these looming threats, the Japanese military demonstrated a clear awareness of the destructive potential posed by American engineering and construction efforts. Their defensive actions, particularly during the intense and fiercely fought Battle of Eniwetok and neighboring islands, reflected an acute consciousness that the United States was not only capable of rapidly building airstrips, bases, and logistical facilities, but was doing so with alarming efficiency. The battle for Eniwetok, where Japanese forces inflicted some of the highest casualties on American troops in the Pacific Theater, was driven by the knowledge that its strategically located airfields would serve as crucial launch points for the B-29s attacking the Japanese mainland. The defense was less about preventing the construction altogether and more about delaying it and raising its cost in American lives. The strategic mindset of Lieutenant General Hideki Kuribayashi, who commanded Japanese forces at Iwo Jima, exemplified this nuanced understanding. His decision to abandon conventional, head-on banzai charges in favor of deliberate, well-fortified defensive positions reflected an acknowledgement that the Japanese could not halt the inevitable construction of American airfields. Instead, the focus shifted to making the process prohibitively costly in human lives, knowing full well that the U.S. military would pursue their engineering objectives regardless. This shift in tactics underscored a recognition of the unstoppable nature of American industrial mobilization and a strategic attempt to impose maximum attrition in the face of it. Similarly, the Japanese strategy at Okinawa showcased a keen awareness that the island's defenses were ultimately doomed to give way to the inevitable establishment of American bases. The Japanese military's decision to hold out as long as possible, even as kamikaze attacks inflicted severe losses on American naval forces, was rooted in the understanding that the island would become a vital American logistical hub. The goal was not to prevent the construction of airfields and port facilities, but to delay their development as long as possible and to complicate their establishment with fierce, sacrificial resistance. Colonel Yahara's defensive plan explicitly acknowledged the unavoidable reality that American forces would succeed in constructing vital infrastructure. The objective was not to thwart construction entirely, but to make the process as costly and difficult as possible, thereby buying precious time and inflicting maximum casualties. The progression from initial surprise encounters through recognition of American capabilities and finally to strategic adaptation illustrates that Japanese military planners understood the significance of American construction efforts. Although detailed documentation of their observations has largely been lost to history, the strategic choices made by Japanese commanders serve as silent testimony to their comprehension of how American industrial and logistical advancements were transforming the battlefield. In essence, these strategic decisions and the tactical shifts they prompted serve as a form of historical testimony, actions that speak volumes about the Japanese military's awareness of the shifting balance of power. They reveal, in ways that written records alone often cannot, how Japanese forces perceived and responded to the unprecedented industrialization of American military construction. The story of Japan's encounters with American construction capabilities is thus more accurately told through an analysis of statistics, strategic decisions, and operational outcomes than through personal testimonies or emotional accounts. The destruction of Japanese military archives and the limited availability of personal narratives have deprived us of the intimate perspectives that might have illuminated how individual soldiers and officers felt when faced with the reality of American industrial superiority. Nevertheless, the surviving evidence, comprising construction statistics, strategic policies, limited testimonies, and post-war analyses, collectively chronicles a story of recognition and adaptation. Japanese forces observed something unprecedented in military history: the full-scale industrialization of military construction that enabled swift and decisive strategic advances. The remarkable feats, such as the 20-day construction of the airstrip on Espiritu Santo, the 15-hour rehabilitation of the Tarawa airfield, and the rapid establishment of massive B-29 bases on Tinian amid ongoing battles, demonstrated a level of logistical and organizational mastery that had never before been seen in warfare. These accomplishments represented more than engineering triumphs. They embodied an industrial and organizational superiority that made the Japanese defeat seemingly inevitable once American forces gained a foothold in the Pacific. For military professionals in Japan who understood the implications of these capabilities, witnessing the speed and scale of American construction efforts must have been profoundly demoralizing. They were confronting not just a formidable enemy, but an industrial juggernaut that could outbuild, outmaneuver, and outpace traditional military expectations. In fighting against this backdrop of relentless industrial proliferation, Japanese forces faced a foe whose capacity to rapidly create and sustain vast. The formidable might of American military forces was not solely rooted in their personnel or conventional weaponry. Rather, it was profoundly amplified by the sheer scale and rapidity of their industrial capacity, which they projected across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean through the relentless efforts of engineers, construction crews, and prefabricated materials. This technological and industrial prowess allowed the United States to outpace Japanese defenses in a manner that was both startling and strategically transformative. Where Japanese defensive positions, meticulously constructed over long months through labor-intensive manual work, once posed formidable obstacles, American construction teams, equipped with the advantages of modern industrialization, could match or even surpass these fortifications within days or a few short weeks, effectively rendering traditional defensive efforts obsolete. The strategic implications of this rapid construction capability were profound and far-reaching. The ability to erect military bases swiftly facilitated the implementation of the island-hopping strategy, a strategic offensive that aimed to bypass heavily fortified Japanese strongholds rather than engage them directly. This approach significantly shortened the timeline of the American advance across the Pacific, compressing what might have taken years into mere months. It allowed the Allies to establish forward bases closer to Japan, significantly enhancing their operational reach and logistical support, and ultimately accelerating the path toward victory. Moreover, this rapid base building meant that Japan's strategic bombing campaigns could be launched much earlier than Japanese planners had anticipated. The Americans' capacity to establish airfields and military installations in record time pushed Japan's defenses into an increasingly untenable position, exposing vulnerabilities that could be exploited with precision and speed. Fundamentally, the unfolding conflict revealed that the Pacific War was not solely a clash of armies and ships, but a contest of industrial might and technological innovation. In this critical arena, Japan found itself severely outmatched, unable to sustain the kind of rapid, large-scale construction that American forces could achieve in such short periods. Survivors' accounts from the Japanese side, though limited, often expressed awe and bewilderment at the speed and efficiency of American engineering feats. Japanese military and civilian testimonies frequently conveyed surprise at how quickly U.S. forces could erect formidable defenses and establish operational bases, even in the face of fierce resistance. As the war progressed, Japanese strategic decision-making increasingly reflected a growing awareness of the importance of construction and industrial capacity. The fierce and seemingly desperate defenses mounted at islands such as Iwo Jima and Okinawa underscored the understanding that American bases would be established regardless of Japanese opposition, making traditional defense increasingly futile. The Japanese response to their material and industrial inferiority took on an asymmetrical character, exemplified by the kamikaze program, an extreme and desperate measure designed to counterbalance American technological superiority through sacrificial tactics. This strategy, however, was ultimately insufficient against the relentless advance of American industrialization. The narrative of the Pacific War did not culminate with tales of impossibly rapid American construction or miraculous defenses, but rather with a strategic acknowledgement of the inevitable dominance of industrial power. The surrender speech delivered by Emperor Hirohito on August 15, 1945, subtly acknowledged the emergence of a new and devastating weapon, the atomic bomb, while also recognizing that Japan's military situation had deteriorated beyond hope. This understated admission encompassed numerous factors, but among the most critical was the awareness that American forces possessed the capacity to project their industrial might across the vast Pacific at unprecedented speeds and scales, rendering continued resistance both hopeless and strategically nonsensical. The motto of the Corps of Engineers, "Constantly we build, constantly we fight," embodied a new paradigm in warfare, where engineering and industrial effort became central to military effectiveness. Combat engineers, capable of constructing airstrips and fortifications at industrial speeds even under fire, exemplified this shift. For Japanese military personnel who observed these feats firsthand, it must have seemed as though they were fighting the very future of warfare itself, an era where sheer industrial capability and organized logistical effort would decide the outcome far more than individual valor or traditional combat virtues. The construction of 6,000-foot-long airstrips within a mere 20 days was not merely an engineering achievement, it was a powerful symbol of a new kind of warfare, one rooted in industrial efficiency and technological mastery that Japan's military traditions had not prepared them to confront. Ultimately, the story of Japan's encounters with American construction capabilities is less about the words spoken or the strategies discussed, and far more about the actions taken. The rapid adaptations in defense, the strategic repositioning, and the eventual recognition of defeat all serve as silent testaments to the transformative impact of industrialization on warfare. These actions, more eloquent than any document or recorded testimony, reveal a military force that gradually came to understand it was engaged not only in combat against an enemy, but also in a struggle against a vast, organized industrial system. Conventional military virtues alone, bravery, sacrifice, tactical skill, proved insufficient when faced with an opponent whose strength lay in industrial efficiency, technological innovation, and logistical mastery. The legacy of this encounter extended well beyond the conclusion of World War II, illustrating how the industrialization of the establishment of the Construction Battalion, commonly known as the CBS, in the Pacific Theater marked a turning point in the evolution of modern warfare. This innovative force brought with it the extraordinary ability to rapidly deploy and construct military infrastructure, enabling the creation of forward bases, logistical hubs, and airstrips at a pace that seemed almost impossible just a few years prior. What once might have taken months or even years to accomplish was now executed in mere days, allowing the United States to outpace their enemy's capacity for destruction with unprecedented speed and efficiency. These capabilities, first observed with a mixture of awe and disbelief by the Japanese forces occupying the Pacific, would become a cornerstone of military strategy moving forward. The ability to build airfields, supply depots, and other critical infrastructure with remarkable rapidity transformed the operational landscape, giving American forces a significant strategic advantage. For the Japanese, witnessing the construction of airstrips and bases at speeds that defied prior understanding was nothing less than witnessing a revolution in military technology and logistics. However, the Japanese perspective on this phenomenon remains frustratingly limited due to a scarcity of personal accounts and detailed documentation, which could have provided a richer, more emotional understanding of their experience during this period. This scarcity of first-hand Japanese narratives serves as a poignant reminder that history is often shaped not solely by the events themselves, but by the systems and capabilities that underpin them. capabilities that the contemporaries might not have fully grasped or documented. The Japanese soldiers and officers who observed these projects might have been unable to conceptualize the full significance of what they were witnessing because their military frameworks did not include the understanding of such rapid construction as a strategic weapon. They saw the physical manifestations, the rising of airfields from jungle clearings and coral reefs, yet lacked the vocabulary and conceptual tools to fully comprehend the magnitude of this transformation. Despite the lack of detailed personal accounts, the numbers speak for themselves across the decades. The construction efforts resulted in the creation of over 110 major airstrips, nearly 550 auxiliary airfields, and bases capable of supporting approximately 1.5 million personnel. These figures illustrate a logistical and industrial feat that fundamentally altered the course of the Pacific War. To the Japanese forces watching these developments unfold, the rapid emergence of these bases from seemingly inhospitable environments was more than just a military achievement. It was a glimpse into the future of warfare, an era where industrial efficiency and organizational mastery could determine the outcome of conflicts. For the Japanese soldiers who observed these bases rising from the dense jungles and coral atolls, who saw airfields become operational in the span of days rather than months, these numbers symbolize far more than mere statistics. They represented a new paradigm in military operations, one driven by speed, efficiency, and technological innovation, qualities that their traditional military doctrine had not anticipated or prepared for. This relentless and rapid expansion of American military infrastructure represented a fundamental shift, the future of warfare arriving at a pace that challenged and ultimately surpassed the existing strategic and tactical paradigms. The transformation of the Pacific theater through the extraordinary construction capabilities of the American forces, embodied in the American military's specialized construction units, stands out as one of the most decisive yet underappreciated factors in the outcome of the conflict. While Japanese forces could often match American bravery and sometimes even surpass American tactical proficiency, they were fundamentally unable to contend with the industrial system that enabled the rapid conversion of captured islands into fully operational offensive bases. This industrial and organizational superiority, exemplified by the accomplishments of the CBS, played a role as critical as any battle fought in determining the ultimate victory in the Pacific. In essence, this remarkable industrial effort, focused on speed, organization, and innovation, proved to be as decisive as any military engagement in shaping the final outcome of the Pacific War. The ability of American forces to swiftly and systematically transform distant islands into potent military hubs fundamentally altered the strategic calculus. It demonstrated that in modern warfare, technological and logistical superiority could be just as decisive as tactical mastery on the battlefield. And this realization marked a significant evolution in how wars would be fought in the future.